Well, we finally had the return of Tony Bobulinski, who came in for a hearing, and it turned out to be quite the spectacle. It's kind of ironic that that was the hearing that Hunter Biden was supposed to be at, and of course he elected not to come. I think that Democrats didn't know what they were going to get with Bobulinski. And as I sent out in a tweet, he actually wildly outperformed, and they weren't ready for him. They probably should have gotten a sense of what was coming when it was first turned over to him, and the first words that were out of his mouth was something to the effect of, should I wait for Hunter Biden to give his opening statement, as he gestured at Hunter's empty chair. That was kind of the moment where I kind of sat up and thought, uh-oh, this is going to be a little more entertaining than would have been anticipated, because he really came in. And this is, by the way, just let's say it at the open. The way that Tony Bobulinski conducted himself at the hearing is the way that anybody who comes in should do it. He didn't have this deference, and he exhibited a complete refusal to give a yes or no answer. He just said what he thought and what he wanted to say, and that's how it should be handled. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Hans.
I completely agree. I mean, he was a masterclass in how to handle yourself and how to deal with being in one of these committees. I mean, just as an example, he called Dan Goldman a liar, and I think Jamie Raskin a liar as well.
And Raskin.
Well, both, but then Raskin was there, like he was he was the ranking member. He was like, "Oh, objection!" It was like he failed to follow the decorum or whatever. There's rule 13 or whatever.
He was asking if the rules that apply to Congress would apply to the witness, and
right.
ultimately the answer was no.
But the thing is that it wouldn't apply. I mean, no decorum rule would apply in any case, because whether someone is a liar or not is a factual issue. That's a factual question. It's got nothing to do with decorum. It's not like using swear words or anything. They're not dressing properly or whatever. It's just you're making a factual statement, and it is a factual statement that Dan Goldman lies all the time. Ironically, just as this was happening, Goldman sent a tweet in which he lied. So he literally lied exactly at the point when Bobulinski called him a liar. Bobulinski, I think, called him a liar generally about all kinds of things, especially about the things he had said about Bobulinski himself. But the lie that he said yesterday, Goldman, I don't want to digress here, but just to illustrate, he sent a tweet yesterday, 2024, and he said that the Trump campaign had worked with Russian intelligence. Even Mueller and everyone debunked that like 6-7 years ago. So I thought that was pretty telling. So right, I agree that he's exactly the way he handles it is exactly how you need to handle these things. But beyond that, I mean, he is supremely talented. He's really good. He's a really, really smart guy. We all saw that in 2020 when he appeared before the media at the second presidential debate and made a statement about Hunter and confirmed that the laptop was real, because, well, he had the corresponding messages. So of course, if the messages are on the laptop, and if Bobulinski has the sort of the other end of the messages, the emails and so on, well, obviously they're real. I thought he was just fantastic in how he carried himself back then. And media, obviously we know what happened there. They just Russian disinformation, they just buried the whole thing. And then he was on Tucker's show. This is also in 2020, shortly after the debate. I thought he was fantastic again. He basically controlled. I mean, it's Tucker's show, but it was like he was in charge. And I felt, when he was before Congress this week, it was exactly the same thing.
He's, I went through a kind of an interesting evolution with him, because when he first came on the scenes, I was fascinated with what he had to say, but I was also cautious. I was assuming that there was going to be a trip up, that there was going to be a catch that was going to come. It's kind of like he was too good to be true. And then he went on Tucker and he did such a phenomenal job. And I was still kind of wondering, and it never happened. And when he came on, I expected him to be good, but he was so much better. And he's got a little bit of a kind of an everyman appearance about him that I think is a little deceptive, at least to my eyes. He doesn't come in looking super polished or anything like that. little ruddy face, sat down, and then just decimates all of Congress. And he didn't just do it once. You know, it wasn't like he had one win. He did it throughout the entire process. And what it really highlighted, I think, was this difference in the way that narratives get allowed to be developed, and the fact that you've got this guy who's coming in, who's highly credible, is a former intelligence officer, and he's got documents, he's got emails, he's got phone records, he's got bank records. He's in contact with everybody who Hunter was in contact with. He's got all this credibility, and he can prove it to you on paper, and the Democrats will do everything to shoot him down and try and pretend that he's not for real. And then you've got people that they try to hold up in, you know, a variety of other elements. And you look at the credibility they have. Kavanaugh's attacker, Lindsey Ford, back in the news again. You know, none of that makes any sense. There's no backing documentation, etc. And yet she's held up by the media as, you know, impervious to any sort of criticism. So there's a huge dichotomy in terms of the ways people are treated.
Don't you find it just so just sickening and tiresome how you know, Blasey Ford is just kind of dug out of the woodwork and paraded in front of the media, just out of nowhere. I mean, it's time. You know, it's been 6 years now. We need to do this because it's an election year or whatever. Who cares? Who cares about that woman? Who cares? I mean, nothing was ever substantiated. In fact, it was disproven. Why would you do that? And it just annoys me. It frustrates me so madly that that the media still has this little bit of control where they can do that. And then they get everyone talking about it, including us right now. So I do find that frustrating. I know it's not going to last forever, luckily. I mean, we're on a trajectory where less and less people watch these shows. And eventually, whether the media, you know, parades Blasey Ford or whoever it's going to be in 5 or 10 years' time, just isn't going to move the needle. No one's going to talk about it. No one's going to care about it. But right now, I still find it very frustrating. Sorry for that.
What it is they don't have the power over the right. And, you know, I mean, they haven't had power over the right in a long time, but they were taken with a certain level of seriousness, right? Sort of people who really had done the work would know when the lies were said, but there was this wide swath in the middle that wasn't really sure. And now they're pretty sure. But what they still do is they give kind of the raw meat, the ammunition to the left, which is still fully on board with any media narrative and frankly kind of hungry for a media narrative, you know, as their ability to push back. So they still lap it up. So it's kind of, to me, it's that divide where it hasn't crossed over into the left yet. The left still believes everything with certainty.
On COVID, it has a little bit. You've got some leftists now who are
COVID's a little different.
Asking, like, why did you lie to me about lockdowns? Why did you lie about vaccines? Why did you lie about the origin? Why did you? I think the main thing about all this, which is a good thing, but I'm just not patient enough to wait for another 10 or whatever years that it's going to take, maybe longer.
Yeah.
The numbers are all going. It's going to go in one direction because no one who has finally had their eyes open to the fact that the media lies about everything is ever going to go back. No one's ever going to go, oh yeah, but I realized that, but now I'm going to trust them again.
Right.
That's not going to happen. It's a one-way street. So it's a death by 1,000 cuts or a death by millions and millions, but just drip, 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 and eventually, you'll get there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is so frustrating to me and probably to you is the fact that it has any effectiveness whatsoever in terms of, you see the responses and the kind of the battles that are ongoing on Twitter. And every now and then I'll get a whole bunch of responses from lefties when I wade into the left side of Twitter and try and engage. And sometimes I'll just shake my head and there's nothing to respond to. It would take so long to try and disprove things that they're saying that you just, kind of shake your head. So it comes back to patience because the narrative's being won, but the timeline is so long that on a day-to-day basis, it can be incredibly, incredibly frustrating. So again, getting back to Tony Bobulinski, who's so credible, and people at the Democrats who hold up, and there never seems to be a historical recognition. It seems like, periodically a new sort of Dem hero will arise. I'm thinking an Avenatti type. And they'll be kind of lionized. And you just know the fall is coming because they're not telling the truth. It's demonstrably provable, and it's only a matter of time. And it always seems to happen. But there's never any looking back. There's never any reflection on what happened. It's simply on to the next person. And
Well, in
so,
the next
it's this lack of introspection. Maybe it's a lack of honesty is maybe a better way to say it. But
Well, the next person in this case was Lev Parnas, whom the Democrats invited. I guess we're back to a system where one party gets to invite one guy and the other party gets to invite the other guy. It wasn't like that for the January 6th hearings when the Democrats were in charge. They were the only ones who determined whom to invite. So maybe the GOP needs to reconsider that. But leaving that aside,
you and I offline were talking about that. We were trading messages, and I think you said something to the effect of, who in the heck allowed Parnas to show up? And then we find out that the Dems were able to invite them. And okay, that's an answer, but as you rightly noted when we were going back and forth, this was never allowed. Republicans could never do that. So why now?
Yep, Republicans still have to learn a lot in terms of how to fight this lawfare and admin fare and whatever you want to call it. All these types of weapons that the Democrats have and the Republicans never use because of decorum, which is kind of funny that it was Raskin who accused the Bobulinski of not following decorum. But anyway, so
Raskin,
the Democrats,
one of the biggest liars in Congress.
Yeah, well, I think he's got a strong competitor in Goldman, but
he does.
So the Democrats brought in this Lev Parnas, and without just a seedy, sleazy guy, but just to show what to illustrate what we were just talking about. Bobulinski not been accused of anything, not charged with anything, just told his story. No one can disprove its story because it's true. Whom did the Democrats bring in? Lev Parnas, a convicted felon. So what sort of they're running out of credible witnesses. And again, I don't mean to digress, but in the upcoming New York trial, the main witness against Trump is going to be Michael Cohen, who's convicted for lying. Lying to authorities. So I share your frustration that that's all that Democrats have. They can only roll out these convicted people who being convicted of the very things that they're supposed to now testify about. But at the same time, people still listen. And how many people were like in media and whatever were sharing Parnas stories? Oh, Parnas disproved everything in Congress. Parnas said that the Bidens didn't do anything bad or whatever. No one said what this guy's background was, right? So that is a bit frustrating. But the fact that they don't have any credible witnesses, it still fills me with hope that more and more Democrats will, over time, realize, hey, guys, don't we have anyone better than that? And no, you don't.
Well, one really interesting thing about yesterday's hearing, speaking of convicted felons, was Jason Galanis testifying from prison. And I was very frustrated. I was throwing things at my monitors because they didn't do a good enough job of utilizing him and what he exemplifies. And it's a unique situation because normally being a convicted felon discredits you. But in this case, because of what Galanis was convicted for, it shines a bright light onto Hunter Biden. And Hunter Biden was an affiliate of Jason Galanis. This all surrounds the Indian tribal gaming bond scam that was set up, for which Devin Archer was involved. He's going to have to do some time. Galanis has been doing a lot of time, and Galanis was probably the ringleader in it, but Hunter was almost certainly involved. Morgan Stanley blew the whistle on this whole thing, this whole scheme, and they thought that Hunter was one of the ringleaders. Went to the government. Hunter was actually contacted by the SEC, and he had to appear, I think, for a subpoena. That was kept under wraps. It was both kept very quiet, and we have no idea what he said. But everything that I've been able to see is that Hunter was actually tied into the very thing that Galanis is in prison for. And I was deeply frustrated yesterday that Congress didn't do a better job about talking about that, because they did a little bit, but not effectively. That was the perfect opportunity to shine a light on the very fact that you've got a man testifying from prison who's engaged in the very same activities that Hunter Biden was engaged in. And Hunter Biden is an empty chair, to the left of Tony Bobulinski.
Yeah, I thought that too, but and I think you make a really good point. It is okay to bring in these convicted felons, depending on what they talk about. And of course, this guy is he's not denying that they ripped off this tribe. He's not denying that these things happen. He's actually admitting it and telling you about that story. So of course, in that case, it makes sense. Whereas in Cohen's case, where he's lied so many times and being convicted of it, to bring him in to tell you the truth about something, that's not going to work. So I think that's a really important point. I completely agree with you that it's just, I don't like the format of these things.
No.
Everyone gets their 5 minutes. Everyone has to, has some staffers write down some questions for them. There's never really, you never get to the point where you have a real inquisition, where you can really get information out of the person, where you can build an argument or whatever. That's something that has been frustrating for many years. They kind of need to change that. But coming back to Bobulinski, I think a few of the highlights were obviously with Raskin and the decorum. That was lovely. There was Goldman and the whether Joe Biden was the big guy. I don't think Goldman expected Bobulinski. Yeah, of course he was. You're here. I could prove it. And then, of course, was AOC as well. And with AOC, talk about this format being bad. It's also bad for Democrats in the sense that they get these questions from their staffers and then they just read out the questions, because she asked, what crimes did the Bidens commit? Bobulinski goes, oh, okay, let me tell you about the crimes they committed, and let me give you the proof, and they weren't expecting any of that. But is there going to be any consequence out of this?
I don't think so, unfortunately. Democrats will always want a yes or no answer. I mean, just think about the fact that Hunter Biden wasn't there yesterday. Just that alone. He just told the committee, piss off, I'm not going to come. Unfortunately, a conservative wouldn't be treated in the same fashion. The bright spot out of it was that Bobulinski did dominate things, and he refused to kind of accept, when you see a congressman asking a question, I want yes or no. Did this happen? Yes or no? And he would not play by those rules, and that kind of broke the game down. The 5-minute format that you're talking about is deeply, deeply frustrating, but I think there's a way around it if the GOP wanted. If it was me, I would get together and I would assign 4 or 5 people to be kind of lead. And anytime my time came up, I would give my time right back to the handful of people that were selected to direct the questioning, to try to keep this thing as much on a line as they could. I don't know about you, but when AOC came on, I literally found it impossible to listen to her. I couldn't take it. I had to turn the volume down. It was so grating and so obnoxious. I did find some great pleasure in watching Goldman try to ask Bobulinski some questions that he clearly didn't want the answer to, and then get the answer. At one point, what did he say? He started squirming and panicking, shuffling papers, and then turned around and told Comer to control his witness. That was a glorious moment. But these things it's frustrating that they just have to be spectacles when they could actually be something more useful.
I don't have that with AOC. I think the thing is that, or I don't have it with Goldman either. Goldman, of course, is not very smart. So it's kind of fun watching these people, AOC, Goldman, whatever, because it is always going to, the train wreck is just around the corner, just sort of anticipating it. But the guy that I used to have, now I don't think he does these things so much anymore. At least I haven't seen him for a while. Well, he's actually been kicked off committees. Is Schiff. He's going to be the new senator out of California.
Yeah, he's off. Yep.
That is somewhere I cannot listen to him. It's completely insufferable because he's smart. That's the problem. And he lies in such a smart way, and you can see it unfolding in real time, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah, I don't want to say that it's admiration, but there is a grudging, like you said, Schiff is smart. He's dangerous because he's smart. He has no ethics. He's willing to lie about anything, but he's not dumb. He's very, very good at it. Goldman, that guy falls all over himself all the time.
And so I don't mind watching that at AOC as well. Of course, the kind of the highest paragon of that, what we're just talking about with Schiff here is Obama. it's just incredible, watching him. He was just in London this week, and his swagger, just the way he went to attend Downing Street. He met UK leadership. By the way, no one complained about Logan Act or anything like that in respect to that. But yeah, when we talk about people that, admiration is probably too strong a word, but something in that direction. Obama is so good at this game. And you just watch it and you go, oh, everyone's just gonna melt in awe, even though the content of what he says is either completely vacuous or is just wrong or, false or whatever. But yeah, they have a few people like that left, not many.
Yeah, no, there's not many, and it does seem to be getting worse. But I still get frustrated by the lack of organization that doesn't seem to be at play. Yesterday should have been, I mean, think about it this way. What would have happened? It was a victory, right? Because Bobulinski did a phenomenal job. But what if it wasn't Bobulinski? What if Bobulinski wasn't Bobulinski and was your more normal witness that came in? It's possible that you could have seen a kind of an end to the impeachment yesterday. Fortunately, that didn't happen, even though I don't have any kind of high hopes that it's going anywhere. And that's one of the problems with these things is in many ways they serve to be kind of public spectacles, distractions almost, where everybody can get emotionally overwrought and up in arms and nothing ever happens and it never really goes anywhere. And I don't have any faith that it will.
You're so right to make that point that Bobulinski saved the day, but the GOP couldn't help to save themselves. They're just
right
every single time, whether it's a COVID hearing, whatever. They're just all just tripping over themselves. They just talk across purposes. They don't, as you say, they don't like allocate time to the other guy to make it like work, to get a longer kind of back and forth. It was Bobulinski who carried that. If he hadn't been there, it would have been, another disaster. By the way, there was a disaster at the Supreme Court this week as well, where if you're going to argue against Democrats, you have to prepare. You have to do your homework. They're going to, well, not AOC obviously, but we just talked about Obama. Well, they also
just so
have
people
very,
know
very
we're
smart
talking
lawyers.
about we're talking about the hearing on the First Amendment.
Right. They sent a really smart lawyer, and he's got a terrible case. The government has no role in censoring anyone, but he made the best of it. He was very, very good. And the other side, they sent in this junior guy, and they just weren't prepared. The guy just didn't. It was just very, very frustrating watching that. And it's like, yeah, it reminded me of GOP and so on. And of course, in the Supreme Court, you don't have a Bobulinski to kind of to save the day. I mean, Samuel Alito, the Supreme Court justice, tried to save the day, but he's just one of 9 justices. He can't save a bad lawyer from. By the way, I don't mean like the guy wasn't bad, but it was just a rookie. Just didn't have it. Maybe in 10 years or so. Is that?
Yeah, it's not that he's a bad guy. He's just a more junior and doesn't have the experience. He shouldn't have been there.
Exactly. Why does the GOP not get it together? Why? What is? And
Well, but it goes so much deeper than that, right? Because this is a case on the First Amendment. This is one of the most important cases that the Supreme Court is going to be hearing. And I think all of us went into this thinking like, hey, this is going to be a slam dunk. The facts are completely on our side. This should be open and shut, easy. Probably won't be a 9-0 ruling just because of the political makeup of the Supreme Court, but it should be an easy 6-3, whatever. And I think you and I came out of that like pretty quickly as the hearing got underway. We were both, kind of this, oh my God, this is not going well. And, to where we come out of it and thinking, geez, I hope it's a 5-4 in our favor. And it's always so unnerving to me that some of the most important elements of our Constitution can hang on a case like this that can get brought up where you have a judge going before this, not judge, excuse me. You have a lawyer on a particular case going before the Supreme Court that has sweeping implications for the First Amendment. And we don't have the absolute best lawyer that money could get representing that case. I cannot understand that.
Well, and the parallel here to Bobulinski is that, well, first of all, there wasn't a Bobulinski at the Supreme Court, which is a big problem, because the parallel is that it's about framing the narrative. And Bobulinski did not allow himself to be pigeonholed into any, framing of any narrative. He was just
Right.
going to say his thing. He was going to make his points, and he didn't care about Democrats and didn't care about whatever they said. He made his points. At the Supreme Court, the exact opposite happened. The government lawyer was up first, and
Who was very good.
Brian Fletcher. Wow, what a legal brain. I mean, I probably would disagree with him on anything to do with policy or whatever, but amazing.
Another one
brain.
of those where you can have admiration for his abilities, even if you don't like his political bent.
Exactly. So he went up and he framed it all as think of it as, what if terrorists are talking online? The government, of course, has to keep an eye on that and so on. That's the framing, terrorists. And he immediately basically won the argument because there was no pushback. No one said, no, this isn't about terrorists. This is about people who were talking about COVID in this way or that way. And in fact, they all turned out to be right. And the government who was doing the censoring turned out to be wrong. No, it wasn't that. They were like, oh yeah, terrorists. And then the guy, the Louisiana guy admitted, yeah, with terrorists, he does have a point. And don't get pigeonholed into the other side's framework or narrative. Just don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, the entire premise of this should have been the government was trying to alter what people could say and censoring them for their viewpoints, and the government was the one that was engaging in misinformation. And that should have been the point hammered home time and time again, and instead they got dragged off, as you put it, into the weeds. And it distilled the entire argument. And now, I hope that it still goes in our favor, but it's not clear cut, and simply because they didn't have the right people there. And I simply cannot understand that.
Yep, neither can I.
Well, just really quick before we close, do you have any idea when we're going to get a ruling on this?
Probably June. This is probably going to be one of those that they're going to sit on for a while.
Yeah. Hopefully, ultimately, wiser minds prevail. If people recall, this was the same case where, was it Ketanji Brown Jackson? I can never remember which name comes first in that sequence. Did highlight the fact that she has no business being on the Supreme Court. And that was pretty incredible to witness. We have a Supreme Court.
She highlights that again and again. It's these Biden judges, which are worse than the Obama judges, which were already pretty bad. Nowadays, you could be pretty happy to get a Clinton judge because they're kind of middle of the road, kind of more or less normal in the scheme of things. Whereas back in the day, you'd have been, oh my God, it's a Clinton judge. I mean, that's how far the spectrum has moved. It's terrible. I think the one little kind of ray of hope here is that often these oral arguments don't matter. So even if you got a terrible lawyer, or in this case, just not a terrible lawyer, just one who is too young, not too inexperienced, going up against the best there is, the best DOJ has, often it doesn't matter because the judges are going to work it out behind the scenes themselves. But it does, of course, matter in terms of public perception. It really has caused a lot of damage on that side. And it could, if you got Barrett or Kavanaugh, these very, very shaky justices, they were supposedly these super duper justices, and they turned out not to be that way, by the way, as many people predicted at the time. So no such problems with Gorsuch, by the way. Fantastic. He's not wobbly, but Kavanaugh and Barrett are wobbly, and obviously Roberts, Supreme Court justice is for been around for a long time. He flipped many years ago. So now you've got three kind of wobbly ones. You got three leftists, three wobbly ones, and three pretty reliable ones. So you got this 3-3-3 situation. And in oral arguments, if they're going to go behind the scenes, which they do, they sit together afterwards and kind of say, well, are we in agreement? No. Okay. Well, then you could write your side, we write our side, and then we'll swap and see, and then we'll meet again. And, there's a sort of process to it. Unfortunately, when oral arguments go so poorly as they did this week, that does give ammunition to let's say the three middle ones, the wobbly ones, because they say, well, but, the Louisiana guy did concede on the terrorism point, and he did say that the government does have a role in censoring and, blah, blah, blah. And
it can make a difference at the margins, right?
Absolutely, it can. All I would say is it's not like in a jury trial where the jury is actually going to discuss what you said and it's going to sway you one way or the other. Ideally, that's the idea of a jury trial. This is a bit different because many of these justices, these are points of law. These are not points of fact in many cases. But so on the law, like what does the First Amendment say? Abridging means any kind of limitation of free speech and so on. The judges would have already had a very clear view of what they think the law is and how it should apply here.
One thing that before we end here, though, I want to get your opinion on something because you're the lawyer and I'm not, is I was sort of struck very negatively by how little the judges seem to understand the case itself. That, here's a very important case. And to me, and maybe I was incorrect, but I didn't come away with the sense that these judges had a great understanding of what fundamentally transpired. Any opinion on that?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, Alito did.
Yeah.
He obviously, this is obviously something very dear to him. He was, as I mentioned earlier, he was almost trying to kind of help this Louisiana lawyer along, like, just squeezing it out of him, and just didn't get there. But of course he can. He's not a witness like Bobulinski who can sway things. He's one of 9 justices who's sitting there and supposed to just ask questions. So I agree. It was a bit shocking that the level. I mean, it's a big case file. There's no question about it. There's a lot to read. They are briefed ahead of time, so they don't all read it themselves. They get their clerks to read this stuff and brief them. Who knows? I mean, maybe the clerks are now more leftist, even the ones with the supposedly conservative justices. So they told them only the part of the story they wanted to tell. I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe that's not it. But I do agree with the fact that they did not seem to be briefed because, for instance, we talked earlier about the government lawyer shifting the discussion in the wrong direction and setting a totally false framework. If they had been, and only Alito pushed back on this, so if they had been briefed better, they would have said, well, it's got nothing to do with terrorism. This is about, look at what happened at Twitter. They went in there and they had a portal. The FBI had a portal with Twitter to flag up stuff. I don't remember anyone talking about that. Well, say if the judge had read the file and had known that, or the fact that Elon Musk is being pursued by 6, 7, 8 different agencies for all kinds of violations and this and that. Of course, that's punishment for Twitter. So that's the coercion. That's how this works. That's why the government cannot and should not and just has no role to play in free speech. But did anyone make that Musk argument? I didn't hear it. And of course, yeah, if a justice had read all this stuff and had known all this stuff, technically they could have brought it up. Like, well, why haven't, talk to me about, what happened with that FBI portal at Twitter? Tell me about that. A judge should not do that because that's really kind of making the case for one of the parties. But it's the Supreme Court. Of course, they can if they want to, and that didn't happen. And I agree with you. It's probably because they hadn't, they weren't well informed enough about this themselves. But has it been in the media? How much of the Twitter files has been in the New York Times? Only negative stuff. Oh, don't read that. This is bad. This is Elon. How much of it has been in the Washington Post? None of it. I don't know what these justices read. I suppose they're still like the old paradigm. They read that crap.
Well, as we close here, that's what fundamentally scares me so much, because our government is, effectively taken up, demonstrably so in my mind, taking the Constitution and throwing it out the window. And the last bastion of protection is the Supreme Court, which is, supposed to interpret the Constitution as the Constitution was written. And the fact that there wasn't immense pushback, and the fact that we're, at risk every time one of these cases comes up is, one of the things that's so frightening, because the importance of the Supreme Court, as the government has thrown our, the Bill of Rights out the window, the importance of the Supreme Courts has only grown, and the Supreme Court seems to be weaker.